Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are here on the ground in Greensboro, North Carolina, one of the factories where they make the Honda Jet in real life. Today we're going to be taking a look at the MG HJet and put it through its paces and show you how to do basically a full flight in it. So it's not going to be necessarily an in-depth tutorial, but we are going to go through getting everything set up, getting up into the air, and getting down. We're going to be flying up to Richmond International Airport in Richmond, Virginia. It should be about a 45-minute flight with a couple of routing things that we'll talk about when we get in there. So let's hop into the cockpit. All right, so welcome into the cockpit of the HJet. Now you can see it's pretty, it reminds me a lot of the TBM, maybe even fewer switches, but it's pretty clean. It's fairly straightforward, but it's going to be dominated by the G3000. So let's get everything started up. The first thing we're going to need to do is turn the battery on. So you can hide the yoke if that helps, and then hit battery on. Our screens should come to life. We do have external power with the parking brake on, so you can turn that on as well if you want to. So you see we've got some systems coming to life, the G3000. This is based on the working title G3000s, but it's packaged independently, so you don't have to install the working title separately. It'll come with this and not impact anything else you maybe have going on. All right, so we are here in the cockpit, and just again giving you a quick overview. We've got your main screens for the G3000 here, our primary flight display over here, and our moving map is going to be on this center screen. And this is all controlled by the two screens down here for the vast majority of things. There are also some of these buttons that you can press. Important note, this is not a G3000 tutorial. Those are out there. This is a deep system that has a lot of capability, and we're just going to show how to, get it set up and put it into a practical flight. So the first thing I like to do is come down to load and manager. We're going to keep it pretty empty. We're going to take two of our buddies along with a co-pilot. And we're going to keep our fuel. We really don't even need that much. We'll keep it at half fuel. And baggage should be good. Now you do have limited payload here, and that'll be important when we come out for the next thing. So we can go to the initialization page, and we've got some system tests here that we can run. It says ready to execute. You can just hit the pre-flight button and it'll start running all those checks while we think about getting everything else set up. So while that's going on, we can come down to flight plan, and you hear the stall shaker going. We are at KGSO, Piedmont Triad International Airport. We are going to be going to KRIC, Romeo India Charlie, Richmond International Airport. So that'll punch it in. Now this does, when you're programming the flight plan on the G3000, I've found it to be a little finicky. I don't know if that's how it is in real life. But it likes me to put in my any departure first, then the en route waypoints, and then the arrival stuff. If you get an error, you do have a standby flight plan that you can use, and this is all perfectly functional. And so if you need a second copy of your flight plan for whatever reason, you can use the secondary flight plan. So we're at GSO. And I'll put up on the screen what we're actually doing. We're taking the Quaker 7 departure out of Piedmont Triad to the South Boston VOR. Then we're going to go right up to the Lynchburg VOR direct and take the Powhatan 5 arrival into Richmond. And we'll shoot the ILS for runway 16 today. Winds are, I think, 190, and 19, it looks like. So some high winds into Richmond. So we'll take that. But we'll just show how to program that all in here. So we go up to procedures here. You have your departure, arrival, and approach. We're going to click on departure. We've got the Quaker 7. We could go straight to Lynchburg, but instead we're going to go down to South Boston here. And that'll show you'll preview the waypoint sequence here. And we can load that in. Now, once we're on this page, we could also punch in our arrival Powhatan 5 from the Lynchburg VOR, and we're going to plan on runway 16. We'll hit load there, and it should all pop up here. So see, we've got to go into the Lynchburg VOR. This is all we actually need right now. But if you want to punch in your approach, you can. We're going to select the ILS for runway 16 and just load it. And now, if you have, so you see it's punched in all these waypoints. We can also add an en route waypoint. So just for our own edification, we could add, say, Sycam, which is a waypoint just a little out of the way of where we're going. So Sycam is SYCAM. So clicking on route waypoint. And this screen may be a little different than some other things you've seen. So SYCAM. But the important thing is the star. So if you wanted to add an airway, you would add the airway and then a star. So for example, you could hit, well, from where I've got Sky Vector, we could, for instance, say Victor 20 to to nuts. So that would be Victor 20. And then it'll give you this extra screen to add the exiting waypoint for that airway. A little more advanced, but that's how you do that. The star is just a point to separate those routes. So we'll put in Sycam, Sierra Yankee, Charlie, Alpha Mike. And that should just add a little kink in the waypoint here. So that's flight plan, all set and ready to go. The only other thing that you want to do potentially is put in your altitudes. You'll see here, unlike an airliner, if you're familiar with flying airliners, those bring in all your altitudes from charts and everything. This doesn't. So we don't have any altitude constraints programmed in naturally. So if you want to use the VNAV and kind of be hands-off, you can program in those altitudes. I'm going to go ahead and punch in some of them. Particularly, I've got Powhatan 5 up. So let's punch in the Powhatan 5, and we'll just start it out here. Our first one is at Hanta. Here, we have a constraint of at or above 13,000. So we could just punch in 13,000 feet here at Hanta. And it's that easy. You can just go in and fill, and it'll create a profile here on the VNAV profile. So I'm going to punch in the rest of these, and we'll get back to setting up the airplane. All right, so we have the flight plan in. We've also finished our pre-flight. So let's keep getting this all set up. So going back to weight and fuel page here, we can set the, we can get all these values from sim. So get from sim your crew and storage, your payload here, your fuel. You can also enter this manually if you really want to, but that's all stuff you can do. And then we can get our V speeds. So again, get from sim, or you can look them up on some calculator that you have and put those in. Now, I have run into a situation where these don't populate. They'll just leave blank. And what I believe that is caused by is you being overweight. So if you're over max takeoff weight, it doesn't take much in this little jet. If you're fully loaded, you're not going to be able to take, if you've got 6 people in the back, you can't take a full load of fuel. So if you're overweight, I think it won't bring in the V speeds. So if you are not getting V speeds here, try reducing the weight a little bit. That's 107 V1 rotating at 113 and a V2 of 120 knots. And so we've got all that. We can accept our initialization and back it on out. From this point, I do like to go into, we can go into the checklist. So if you come to checklist here, it'll bring it up on your PFD. Now this is all going to be controlled by this little knob here. You click it to make something green and then scroll to change items. So battery is on, oxygen is checked and on, pressurization is normal. That is out on this panel. Electrical is on and normal. We've got normal generators. ELT down here is showing normal. You're looking for everything really here to be normal. Nose wheel steering down here, normal. Landing gear is down. The handle is down. This right here is your parking brake. Alternate gear release handle is fully stowed, and we'll just run through this checklist. So parking brake, make sure it's set. You'll click it a million times. Flaps are up. Thrust levers are in the cutoff position back here. Speed brake is retracted. But this is, again, just a good way to do it. It helps me from having to open up a PDF on my screen. Ice protection, all down here. This should all be configured when you start up, but normal and off. So ice protection is this panel here. And that is normal and off. Fuel panel, likewise. Down here, fuel, everything is in the normal position. Trim panel, checked, set, and normal. So again, all our trims we're showing normal and nothing's out of line too much. Windshield heat panel, Down here on the far right side, normal. And again, if I had to summarize all this, just leave it off. Everything needs to be a normal. So you're looking for a lot of normals. Pneumatic panel, normal. Glare sheet panel, dark. All this is fine, and we've done all our avionics stuff. So then you can just go on to the next checklist, and we get starting engines. So passenger briefing, again, we are departing out of Golf Sierra Oscar here. Weather is 170, wind 170 at 10 knots, 10 surface miles visibility, so looking good. Altimeter 3021, so we can set the barrel here. (3021) and here 3021. We're going to depart out on the Quaker 5. Basically following this flight plan, we're going to climb up to 18,000 feet at SciCam, and then we're going to start descending, basically per the VNAV profile that we've punched in. So passenger briefing is now completed. Rudder pedals are adjusted. I'm good in the real world. Seat belts are good. I'm seated nicely in the real world. Doors are closed. Always helpful to do a check outside now. If you do want to open your doors, aircraft systems, system controls, that is all your lights. Your exterior lights, norm is like automatic, but you can change all those. Interior lights, you can bump up the cabin light a little bit if you want to. And then if you come down here to sim options, you can go to sim actions. That's the rest of your stuff. So you can open up all your doors, window shades, static elements, whatever else. So again, just make sure that your door is in fact closed. So parking brakes, we'll reset them. And cast messages, it's saying we have no low oil pressure, which makes sense because we don't have any engines running. We have 23.5 volts, so here's all your engine parameters and your system parameters. We've got 25 volts on the electric bus, you can see there. And now engine start is exceptionally simple in this airplane. We've got two start buttons, the left and the right. We're going to start with the right, and all you have to do is hit the start button and let it go. It's going to run up to about 10 on the N1, and then we're going to knock our throttles into idle. Once you do that, just like any other jet, it'll spool up. And we'll just wait for it to stabilize. Again, it doesn't go too high. And let me just make sure my throttle's working. It is. Once that's all kind of stabilized, we can hit the left engine now. And out of idle. And we've got our cam messages going, our cast pages going away. Cabin power is off. We can flip that on by lowering the switch. So engine start is done, just like that. Engine instruments, all our readings are looking good. Things are climbing. We are all green. Anti-ice is not going to be required for now. External power is disconnected. It automatically disconnects when you start the engine. I don't know exactly what the trigger is. I think it's a combination of parking brake and engine on, engine off. And then flight controls, clear and free and correct. Let's just check and make sure our physical hardware is set up. All right, so we are basically ready to go. Next checklist is going to be before taxi. Anti-ice, not required, but if it was required, again, it's down here in this section. So the ice protection, we can turn wing anti-ice on. Right now, it's just in normal wing flow. Engine anti-ice, again, if we need it, we can turn it on here. It is a little cloudy, so we may have to turn it on here in a little bit. Whew, now transponder. So to mess with your transponder, it's going to be down here on this particular screen here in the top right-hand corner. So you see transponder 1. We can just click on it and type in our code. Will be 2121 today. And we'll turn it on. You can also turn it out to reporting for mode C. Also, if you're on VATSIM, you want to control what mic you're talking on, this is where you do it, and here are your radio controls as well. So you can type in whatever frequencies you want, all from, that's your main panel that you will control your nav nav and comm one off of. Okay, so rolling on, transponder code is entered. Flight ID, we are going to be, I guess, Charlie Foxtrot, Juliet, Juliet, Tango. That doesn't roll off the tongue. Flight plan is entered, looking good. Our nav source, we want to set it into FMS. Right now it's in VOR. So you'll start off in VOR, you got to turn it to FMS, you need to see a purple knob. Otherwise, you won't go the right way when you take off, and you'll be wondering what's going on. Altimeters are set 3021, flaps set for takeoff. Speed brake is checked. I can check my axis. But this is the speed brake button, so you can click it or not. So we want to make sure that's retracted. Cabin signs. Again, we're going to control cabin signs from aircraft systems, interior lights. We will put on fasten seat belts and no smoking in our fancy airplane. Parking brake then can be released, and we are good to taxi. So at this point, you call for taxi, and taxi on out. We are at Greensboro, Piedmont Triad Airport. It's a pretty simple airport. We're taxiing to runway. Looks like we'll do probably 23 left. So taxiing out to the runway now. It doesn't take a ton to taxi. You just release the parking brake, increase the throttle a little bit. We're working at like 33% N1. And that's really all you need to get moving, and then you can bring it back to... we do have taxi checklists, so during taxi we want to make sure that our brakes are checked. Nose wheel steering is checked and working. And flight instruments are checked. Everything looks okay on our end. And then we got before takeoff checks. So flaps are going to be set for takeoff. That's one notch of flaps. So we want to make sure they're in the takeoff mode. Our trims, we want to be, we got this little thing here, this pitch trim. We want to make sure that it is green and lit up. So bring it down until those arrows light up. 4.4 will do it. Speed brake retracted. We've got no real messages at the moment, which is good. Let's get back out of this and back into checklist. Navigation is all set up. We're going to basically fly runway heading for a little bit and go then straight following following our GPS. Flight guidance, again, we're on FMS, good to verify, especially if you're in a VATSIM type situation. Our takeoff landing data confirmed. Takeoff briefing, again, we're going to take off, we're going to go full power, and we'll rotate at our V speeds of 100 and I think it was 120. Radar is not functioning in this build, so it is off. And ice protection. We'll turn engine anti-ice on for now as we climb out, and if we need some wing anti-ice, we will use that. Going to the next checklist. So now we're all set for after takeoff, but if you want to control what's shown here on your PFD, you go back to your aircraft systems page, and you can click on status. That'll bring up the status page. There are several that you can go through. You can look at your environment. Your fuel is one important one you might be interested in. And then all your other systems. So there's multiple views you can look at to monitor systems, but status is going to be the main one that'll just show you what everything is doing on your system. All right, so we're ready to go. Let's taxi on out onto the runway and take on off. All right, so we've verified we're at 2-3 left. That's what we're aiming for. We're going to fly runway heading for a little bit, and then we will we'll basically follow our FMS and what it's telling us to do. One thing we can do while we're here is make sure that our heading bug is synced forward and our altitude. We don't have any restrictions right now, but you can bring it up to a 10,000 feet will do for now, and then we'll go up to 18,000 a little bit later. All right, so we're all set. We're going to hold on the brakes, bring the power forward, and we're going to go into the takeoff detent. Should see TO up top. Let the engine spool up. And once it's stabilized, we will release. It's taking a little bit of rudder to stay center line. We do have a bit of a crosswind on takeoff today. But airspeed's alive. We're passing 90 knots now. And just a light pullback, and you should rocket on up. We'll bring the gear up and just maintain runway heading at this point. You can bring the throttle back now to MCT. That's max continuous thrust. And that'll be our climb setting. Again, this airplane is pretty sprightly. But it is fun to hand fly, but it's very, it's pretty responsive as far as business jets go. Just based on its size, it's basically a little small private bond jet. So we've rolled out onto our FMS heading. At this point, it's a good time to make sure that we know how the autopilot works. So we want to put it into nav mode. That'll go FMS. And we can also set up a climb. So we can do a speed climb at maybe, say, 200 knots would be good. And click in the autopilot. Again, just like a lot of other Asobo and Garmin-based systems, the autopilot's pretty simple. You have autopilot, yaw damper. I'm not sure why our flight director isn't coming in, or wasn't coming in earlier, but it may just not be because we had the autopilot activated. But also good practice to know how to hand fly, and it does feel good to fly by hand. And you can see it's turning us left. It's going to put us onto our course here, just like any other autopilot system on any other airplane, especially a Garmin-based one, would work. Now we are going to go ahead and bring our cruise up to 18,000 feet here. And it does take a little bit of dialing to get it up there, but we'll let that happen. And then once we're done with that, we can bring the speed up, and we can go, as high as 250 knots here in the climb. But leave it. You can leave the throttle in max continuous thrust as long as you're not overspeeding. One more quick note: flaps need to come up. You have a minimum airspeed for that of 130 knots. So above 130, you're good to bring up the flaps. All right, so we are up in the air. We can run the after takeoff checklist here if you're looking for something to do. Landing gear is up. Yaw damper is engaged, hence the YD there. Flaps are up. Minimum of 130 knots. Thrust levers are an MCT. Flight guidance is doing what we want. Ice protection is pretty good. We don't seem to have much ice. And cabin signs are as required. That'll take us to climb, and it's really just monitoring from there. So altimeters, once we hit the transition altitude, not that we even will in this flight. You can also go to the next checklist, and again, cruise. You set your altimeters and monitor your systems. Which is why it's good to go back to the status page, because it's not terribly informative. Now, a couple other small notes on the map. If you want to adjust the range, you use this this knob here, and this kind of panel is going to drive most of the map functions here. We're not going to get into too much of it, but you've got basically all your pertinent waypoint information up here along the top. A nice little map. You can slew it around, but I'm not going to. Again, that's kind of more of a G3000 thing. And you can also kind of see the VNAV profile here. So this is showing you where your top of climb is estimated to be And when we get up to the descent, it will show us that as well. So we're going to get on up into cruise, and yeah, once we're there, we'll talk a little bit about some of your other automation features. All right, so we are here at cruise altitude, and now one thing to keep in mind, just like something like a CRJ, you're going to have to keep an eye on your speed as you're coming, hitting your top of climb. So if you get distracted during your climb, make sure you're paying attention, because otherwise there will be some loud beeping telling you you're over speed. So when that happens, you can use spoilers or you should bring power back. But either way, you want to keep it below around that barber pole 270 knots. So once you get up to cruise, you do have a cruise speed control that we can use. It's the CSC button here, cruise speed control. That will basically, again, you set the speed with your throttle. So you want to get a speed that's nice and stabilized. We're at about 252 knots, which is pretty good. And then you can hit cruise speed control. It'll blink here, and it may not take the first time. So again, just you have to kind of hit it, and yeah, so that didn't take it, blinked out. Hit it the second time, though. The speed has to be stable. So if your speed is all over the place, it's not going to grab that speed and hold it. So it is a little bit finicky. But it will hold the speed you're in cruise, you know, as you go through that. One note, you do have to be in altitude hold mode. If you're in VNAV, it won't work. So altitude hold mode, you can use whatever nav I think you want. But that's cruise speed. It's a fairly straightforward thing. One more important note, if you hit the throttles, if you move your throttles around, you'll see it'll go, your speed on your PFD will go blue, and it'll kick out of cruise speed control. So you got to keep the throttles where they are, and if you do want to, but if you do need to take control, that's how you do it. So another important skill, just in case you're on a network with a live ATC or anything like that, is going direct to. So there's a couple ways to do it. We can go either hit here and go direct to, and click here to punch in the waypoint we want to go direct to, or you can pick it out of your flight plan. So if we go to the LYH VOR here, we can just hit go direct to that, activate, and that'll put us on a direct path to the Lynchburg VOR. So we're now crossing the Lynchburg VOR here, Lima Yankee Hotel. We're going to go to Woolock, and again, it's just kind of popped us back onto our track from the direct to. So we're now on the arrival, the Powhatan 5, and then again, we've got the ILS for runway 16 punched in. If we had to change that, you would just go into procedures here and change it as necessary. So next, we're waiting on our basically our vertical descent. We have about 4 minutes to top a descent. So if you have your altitudes all punched in, your VNAV profile down here will say time to top descent, like 3 minutes 56 seconds. You can also, if you're looking for more VNAV stuff, you can go into perf here on your right-hand panel and go to VNAV, and this will show, you can have this screen up, which will show just the waypoints in text form. Or you can click Show VSD, and that'll show you kind of the side profile of your vertical speed descent. So one more thing that we did wrong when we started up is your speed bugs. Now, to actually see them come onto the PFD, you need to actually turn them on. So all on, 107, 113, that'll show on our PFD now. But now that we're going into takeoff, now that we've taken off, we want to land. So we got a V approach speed of 113 and our VRAF of 108. So you can click them all on. Once that's lit up, these speeds will populate here onto your speed tape. We should have had it on takeoff, but I didn't hit all on. So that's an important step, hit all on to get those speed bugs on. So we're coming up on our top of descent here now. You can see the profile start to slant off. So now for VNAV, we want to use that. It's pretty simple. We're going to click the VNAV button. You're going to see it's going to kick off our cruise speed control. We're going to get a green light here, and it should show VNAV here on the PFD. We're still at 18,000, but now it's going to try and follow this profile here to descend. You're going to be controlling the power, so you need to be ready to use your speed brake or whatever else you need to do. So bring the power back, manage your speed brake, all that kind of thing. It is not necessarily as smart as a 737 VNAV or anything like that. So it's still much more manual. You got to make sure all your altitudes are punched in right. And if you see something that isn't quite right, you need to take control. It also can, we'll see if it does it here, but buck around a little bit when it kicks in. I think that's a modeling thing. But here you go. We're going to start our descent now. We're going to come back on the power pretty aggressively. Otherwise, it is going to... take off. And then we should also lower our altitude. Our lowest altitude right now, we're going to go down to 2,800 feet, or 3,000 feet at the bottom. And again, just pulling power back. Use speed brake if you have to keep your speed within acceptable tolerances. And a quick look at the weather in Richmond, just for our own intelligence. 10 knots, 180. Altimeter 3018. We're below the transition altitude, so we can put that in, 3018. Now, if you do get above 18,000, you can hit that and push it and take it to standby, which is a nice feature. And so we see we're losing speed now, so we can go ahead and bring our throttles back up and just keep an eye on it because you're now manually in control. And at this point, we're now just stepping down to our 13,000 feet. At Hanta. And as we descend, it will maneuver fairly aggressively. So you see it's going down as far as negative 10 degrees on the nose. So you do feel like a little bit of a fighter pilot sometimes when the VNAV kicks in. All right, so we're now into our final plunge altitude. We're going down to 3,000 feet to pick up the ILS for runway 16. We do have, I have punched in the ILS localizer frequency for 110.7 here. And the nav frequency over here. And the other thing to just keep in mind is VNAV is not a hands-off thing in this airplane, so you're still managing power. You're still managing all those systems. So it's a little hands-on. It's really up to you as the pilot whether that's the most efficient way for you to descend in this situation. But if you're going to get knocked out of it for things like ATC calling you up and giving you an altitude, there are, other ways that you can descend. All right, so we have hit Powhatan. We're going to keep on going down to 3,000 feet and head to our initial approach fix. We've got the VOR for our nav frequency 110.7. We're going to shoot the ILS for runway 16. We need to come back even more now. So at this point, again, if you're this low and still just fast, speed brakes are your friend. And we'll try to aim for about 210 knots here. Again, we've got pretty slow V-speeds right now for approach. Our V-ref on approach, I think, is like 120. So we're going to be going fairly slow. Yeah, getting under 200 is a good start. Once you get the speed brakes, will slow it down quite a bit. Gear will also slow it down quite a bit when you get there. So we're basically going to try and maintain our present heading, more or less, until we hit the localizer. You can see Richmond here. We're going to basically turn on capture the localizer here 1. It's automatically tuned to Loc 1 on our PFD. All right, so we're about 4 miles from Fybug now. We're going to get ready and start thinking about our approach. So we're going to go with our flaps in the takeoff approach configuration now. So that's 1 notch of flaps to start, and then once we're on final, we'll give it the rest of it. We're going to descend down to 2,500 to pick up the localizer, and the other thing we're going to do is arm the approach mode. So approach mode, it should come pick up the localizer. I think it might have been a little late on that. We can also start bringing our gear out. Then once we're established, we'll go ahead and put our full flaps out. For this, you can also land with takeoff approach flaps in icing conditions per the checklist. Landing gear down, speed brake is in and retracted. Flaps, we're in takeoff approach, we'll go down to landing here in a sec. Our airspeed will get it down to the VREF, which is about 121, I think it's 113 knots. And then we will disengage the autopilot when we're ready to come down. So we're following the localizer, and we have the glide slope as well now. Now we're just keeping the power back. 120 is probably fine. Now, once you get into landing, this airplane is going to be just a little bit floaty. So once you cut the power, hold the flare, and it does probably take a little bit longer than you think it should in your head to stop. It is a small airplane, but it's not a STOL airplane by any stretch of the imagination. So it does take a little bit of runway to slow down. So we have our localizer, we have our glide slope. Now we're coming on down. We can bring the last notch of flaps and give it a little bit more power just to maintain our airspeed at that 110, 113. I'm aiming really between 110 and 120. If you're a little heavier loaded, 120 is going to be kind of your typical VREF approach speed, but it varies. Airspeed is VREF, and then we will disengage our autopilot and yaw damper once we're done. And again, just good to have the status page up there. Now, in the event of a go-around, what we're going to do is go full power, bring the flaps up, bring the gear up, and we'll fly runway heading. But again, don't overthink it, just go full power and climb on out. And now our approach, we're looking okay. We're a little to the left of the runway, but it should be fixing. We do a little bit of a crosswind from the left. But that's looking all right. Speed is good. Again, I have my autopilot disconnect bound. I think you should too. It's a good thing to have bound. You can also hand fly at this point too. We're controlling speed ourselves, so you can more than happily fly the approach from here. Maybe be good. All right, so that's autopilot. That's our airplane. And I'm just going to try and follow the flight director. To get us down to the runway. But again, no real trick to this, just managing speed, being on speed, and holding the flare. And managing expectations in terms of distance. It is pretty maneuverable, this airplane, so if you are need to make a tight turn or climb out of something that you see, it is perfectly capable of that. You also have a velocity vector here, that's that green symbol we're kind of putting on the runway. So if you want to fly this fighter pilot, like, you could put that on the threshold of the runway and that's where you're going. And you can see that crosswind pushing us off to the right, off to the, off to the side a little bit. So now we're getting a little slow, but we're okay. We're well within bounds. A little bit of wind here. And again, it's a fairly nimble airplane. But on a bumpy day like today, might take a little control input just to keep on the runway. Coming down, we're looking all right on the glide slope. But we've got the runway made. We're over the threshold now, so bringing the power back. And again, just holding the flare. Letting it come down. Little float. Let's get those wheels down. And we'll just roll out to the next taxiway. So it doesn't take much to flare it, and and float a little bit. It's not much of a taxiway. But, yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It is a nimble airplane on final, though. So if you do need to climb or go around, you've got plenty of power and plenty of maneuverability. So we're going to taxi on up. We will go through the shutdown and button this thing up. All right, so shutdown of this plane is pretty simple. We're just going to put the parking brake on. Wheel chocks, again, we're not really modeled. They're part of the static elements, which you can put on when the engines are off. Anti-ice go off. External power will come on when the engine goes off. So thrust levers go then to the cutoff position. So if you're in idle, to cutoff. And oxygen supply pull off. Cabin signs can go to, you can turn all that off. And then we go into our sim options and open up all our doors or whatever else you want to do. So again, pretty simple, pretty fun airplane. The HJet, it is a fun, fast thing if you want to fly G3000 stuff in a jet form. It's a good airplane for that. And again, there's a lot more depth to those systems, particularly the navigation systems. But that's the basics of how to fly the HJet. I mean, you can take this up to whatever altitudes and however far you want to go. So thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, comments, fun places to fly in the HJet, drop in the comment section below. As always, this has been VFR. Take it easy, y'all.